When you're told that you've played a brilliant move, you feel dopamine rushing through your body because you realize that you've played a fantastic move that was very hard to spot. And at least when I do it, I kind of feel like I'm having a Tal moment, you know? I get very excited. So today, I'm going to show you a game that I played a few days ago where I didn't just play one brilliant move, but I played two brilliant moves. And this was a tournament game. It was played in Title Tuesday, and I was facing a 2300 candidate master. So I was facing a very strong opponent, and I just think that the two brilliant moves are really beautiful. So I wanted to make a video out of the game. So I hope you enjoy the game, and let's get right into it. So I was having the white pieces, and my opponent was called Bukimiz. I don't know the name, but I played d4, obviously, as always. My opponent went d5. I played c4, the Queen's Gambit. He captured my pawn. This is the Queen's Gambit accepted. And this has become more and more popular lately, actually. I feel like in the past it wasn't played as much, but now it's become more popular. And the idea is that black is kind of giving up their center, but as white, what you're going to be able to do is that, or black is giving up their center, but instead they are going to be able to get quite a lot of piece activity, and sometimes this d4 pawn can become a little bit weak. So e3, bishop takes c4, e6. The idea is typically to go c5 and try to trade this pawn for this one and make this pawn become an isolated pawn. Knight f3 and c5. Here we go. So I castled. My opponent went a6. The idea being to go b5. And now I played a move that I know that I'm not sure if it's a good move. I went a4. I remember once when my dad saw me playing a4 in the Queen's Gambit accepted, he was like, Anna, you cannot play a4 in the Queen's Gambit accepted because you're going to give up this square forever. But I think it's okay. I just think that it's maybe sometimes a little bit uncomfortable for white to play this. But in the reason it being that this b4 square becomes very, very, very vulnerable for me. I mean, if my opponent gets a knight over here, there's nothing that's going to kick away this knight. So this knight just becomes a monster. But I decided to do it anyways because I wanted to prevent b5. So here, my opponent went knight c6. I developed bishop e7, and now I went d5. And this move looks maybe a little bit strange. The idea of it is that many times this is going to become an isolated pawn. So what I wanted to do was that I wanted to basically trade this so that my opponent wouldn't be able to get me an isolated pawn. And basically the idea after that was just to go e4 and try to get my bishop out. So that was my idea with d5. So we captured. You need to also realize that this is a 3-minute game. So, you know, it's a blitz game. It's a short game. So it's not really a game where I'm spending a lot of time per move. And now I went knight b4, threatening my bishop. I thought that I have to go back with the bishop, and bishop c2 felt like a good move because I thought that after trades, I would prevent this knight from coming to c2 at any point. So I went there and he castled, and now I went e4, which the computer kind of roasts me for doing. Now, why did I go e4? Well, I went e4 because I wanted to get this bishop out. I feel like this bishop is in jail. The bishop needs to come out. I wanted this bishop to go to e3 or f4. It just felt very trapped here. And especially with my bishop on b3, I cannot push b3 and try to go bishop b2. So I decided to go e4 because it felt like a move I had to do at some point. My opponent went bishop g4, pinning my knight. And I decided to bring out my bishop. And soon, probably my opponent is going to have the ideas of going b5 and try to get a 2 versus 1 situation on the queen side. But I was feeling pretty happy here. I mean, I was playing a strong opponent. I thought my position was like definitely okay. I thought it was definitely at least, you know, kind of equal. So rook c8 was played. And now I decided to also bring my rook to c1. And once again, the best idea for my opponent is to go b5 and just start pushing these pawns, which is why maybe it would have been better actually for me to have the bishop on c4 to prevent b5. Instead of going b5, my opponent went queen b6, which I think was to defend this pawn and to bring the other rook into play. But I'm not really sure otherwise what the idea of queen b6 is. So I just decided to kick away the bishop to get air for my king and to ask this bishop, where are you gonna go? And now my opponent made a blunder. And it may not seem like a big blunder, but this was one of the big moments, okay? So my opponent decided that they wanted to do an intermediate move. And let me tell you something. Every time your opponent does an intermediate move, you should kind of open up your eyes and ears and be like, okay, you are trying to outsmart me. Let me try to outsmart you. Does that make sense? So what I like to do when my opponent, does an intermediate move is that I try to see if they've blundered. So I start calculating, all checks, captures, and attacks, which is the method every time you want to calculate something. I look at all the checks, all the captures, and all the attacks. So my opponent went rook f d8, attacking my queen. But I thought, if I am able somehow to get my to get my queen out of the attack and capture this bishop at the same time, I'm going to win a piece. Is there any way that I can do something like that? How do I get to this bishop? Well, to get to this bishop, I need to move this knight. Can I move this knight with the tempo? Yes, I can. So after calculating all the checks, captures, and attacks, I realized that I have this beautiful move, bishop takes f7. And this is the first brilliant move of the game. Now, I was very happy with this move because I just realized that it works. And it's not going to win me a piece, but it's going to win me a pawn. The idea is that if the king moves, for instance, to h8, then I'll just simply move my queen and I'll just be a pawn up. This will be a free pawn. However, if my opponent captures my bishop, just like they did during the game, I have knight e5 check. And here, I will be threatening both the king and the bishop. But the important part is that I'm able to capture the bishop with the queen because I'm opening the pathway for that. And if my opponent would go king e6, this would just become an absolute disaster, as this would be a checkmate in just a few moves. Let me just show you the checkmate. So king d4 and then queen e4. This is the checkmate. So my opponent cannot try to somehow pick up my knight. Instead, he had to go king g8, which was the move that was played. Now, in this position, I captured on g4. My opponent went rook c7, trying to prevent knight d7, I believe, for some reason. And I just decided to get this rook, which was right now kind of blocked by this pawn. I wanted to get it to a better square, so I went rook d1. And now, my opponent did the second blunder of the game. And in fact, in the beginning, it doesn't say that it's a blunder because the computer itself doesn't see at first my best move. My opponent went queen f6. And here, I have a fantastic move. And this, everybody, is the second brilliant move of the game. Now, I'm going to give you a second to think about it, to see if you can find it. And if you can, write it in comments down below, okay? Maybe with a little spoiler alert, because there's people that for some reason read the comments before they watch the video, which you shouldn't do. Because then they get mad when they see spoilers in the comments and they start writing in all caps, "Spoiler! How could you ever tell us the answer to this person?" And, it's your fault for reading the comments first. Watch the video first and then write in the comments. So I'm giving you the chance now to pause the video, find the brilliant move, write it in the comments, and then come back. Okay, so I'm going to explain it to you. Right now, I could tell that there were a lot of pieces that were weak. Why could I tell this? Because I saw that the light squares here were pretty weak, and I realized that this rook is only defended by a bishop. So after like 30 seconds of thinking, I realized that I just have a beautiful move, which is bishop g5, sacrificing two pieces at the same time. I am sacrificing both my bishop and my knight. But what happens if my opponent picks any of these pieces up? Well, if my opponent picks up the bishop, I have a smothered checkmate. Queen e6. If king f8, I have a checkmate in one. If king h8, I have check, 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 and mate. So my opponent cannot pick up the bishop. It's going to be a checkmate. Well, let's say what happens if the opponent just moves, the queen. Well, if they move the queen, then once again, I'm winning. I'm winning a lot of material. You cannot move the queen. What happens if you try to go anywhere else with the queen. I don't know, if you go back with the queen all the way here, what happens is that I simply pick up the rook and I end up winning a lot of material once again. So the only move that my opponent can do here really is to capture my knight. But when my opponent captures my knight, I have this move bishop f4, winning now the rook. So I am deviating this queen and forcing it to place itself in a diagonal where I win an exchange. And I just think that this is beautiful. And this is really the reason I wanted to make a video out of this game. It's really just because of this one move. I think bishop g5 is one of the prettiest moves that I've found in a very long time, especially in a 3-minute blitz game. I'm very happy with it, and especially against a 2300 rated opponent. So my opponent captured on e4, and now it just ended up being an endgame where I was an exchange up. And I knew here that I was winning. So my opponent was very low on time. I started activating my rooks. I knew that the more pieces I trade, the easier it's going to be for me to win, because my opponent is going to have less pieces to defend with. So I picked up a few pawns, had to obviously make sure that I wasn't blundering any forks or anything like that, and try to trade rooks. That was everything I was trying to do. My opponent traded a knight for some reason, which I think made things a little bit easier for me. And now I just realized that I have to somehow try to find a way to trade my rook. So I was just kind of moving around my rook to find a better pathway for it. And here I finally ended up being able to trade one rook. And now I knew that, you know, worst case, absolutely worst case, I would always be able to just bring my king all the way here, pick up this pawn and win with the a pawn. That was always the worst case scenario. But I also just saw this idea of forcing the king back. And after check, this became a checkmate. And just like this, I won in 51 moves. But I'm really happy with this game. And like I said, I'm just really happy that I found that move. So I'm going to insert right here my reaction from after the game. 92 brilliant moves and 93% accuracy. Too brilliant. 2 brilliant moves. I think it's the first time in very long we have that. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what your favorite move was, and have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye.